Growing reports of anti-Semitic incidents across the country. Let's discuss now. Rabbi Shmuley Boteach is the author of Israel Warrior, and CNN political commentator Peter Beinart, a contributor to The Atlantic. Thank you both for coming on. This is a very serious subject that I want to talk about. Rabbi Shmuley, I appreciate it. Just a few minutes ago, we discussed this recent spate of displays of anti-Semitic incidents in our country, New York City and Chicago, Rice University in Texas. We're talking about the major university, two major cities. Does it seem to you that anti-Semitism is on the rise?
Well, if you just attend any synagogue around the United States, you'll know that it's on the rise because there's never been security like there is today in front of Jewish day schools, in front of Jewish houses of worship. But a lot of it is not just connected with the rise of white supremacists, which of course is concerning, and no one needs to teach the Jewish community about how we can suffer under white supremacists. The Holocaust was just 70 years ago. But it's also connected with hatred of Israel. And when you have countries like Iran that are allowed to threaten a second Holocaust with impunity, and they are not called out for their genocidal intent or their abrogation of the 1948 UN Anti-Genocide Convention, which expressly forbids genocidal intent, if you can speak about the Jewish people in a form of annihilatory intent without paying a penalty, then Jewish life is demeaned and cheapened. So I don't think we could just discuss the rise of white supremacists and how that affects anti-Semitism in America. We have to also speak about the assault on the state of Israel as a Jewish entity and how it leads to hatred of Jews.
Okay, but let's talk about the rise here in the United States, because some are saying, and if you've heard the rabbi who was on before, is saying that she believes that part of it is the rise of Trump and the Trump administration. I know that you have been friends with Donald Trump and Steve Bannon for a while, but they believe that Bannon's Breitbart inflammatory comments that you see on Breitbart and so on, that it may be influencing White House policy and thusly so anti-Semitism. Are they wrong?
Well, no one would decry and deplore white supremacists more than me as a Jew. Having said that, I'm not here as a spokesman for Breitbart or the administration, but Breitbart has been very strongly pro-Israel. They have a Jerusalem bureau. They have gone against the BDS boycott against Israel. So I don't know if you can attribute it to that, to be perfectly honest. And Trump has at least taken on Iran, who are testing ballistic missiles. Yesterday they said it would take 7 minutes to destroy Tel Aviv. These are very serious things. And not to give the administration any credit for standing up for Israel when we saw the UN condemn Israeli settlements while Arab children were being blown to smithereens in Aleppo, and there was no UN Security Council resolution against that. The administration in the last weeks of the Obama administration were far more focused on Jews building condominiums in the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria than Arab children dying. That seems to be a form of prejudice and bigotry, and I think the administration is kind of reversing some of that.
Peter?
Look, I'm not here to say that Breitbart is anti-Semitic. I actually think that Breitbart has been much, much more bigoted towards Muslims than it has been towards Jews. But I do think it's important to recognize that it's entirely possible to both be anti-Semitic and pro-Israel. In fact, many people throughout the last 100 years have been anti-Semitic and pro-Israel for a very simple reason. They didn't want the Jews in their country. They wanted the Jews to go somewhere else. So I think these need to be discussed as separate topics. I think that Donald Trump has done several things over the last few years that are disturbing. I'm not saying he's an anti-Semite. I don't know his soul, but things that have encouraged anti-Semites. Going back a few years ago when he referred to Jon Stewart repeatedly as John Leibowitz. Why did he do that? His final ad in the final ad of his campaign, where he showed 3 Jews, Soros, Yellen, and Blankfein, and spoke in very classically anti-Semitic terms about global power structure, global power interest. I'm not saying Trump is an anti-Semite. I'm not saying Bannon is an anti-Semite. I'm not saying Breitbart is anti-Semitic. But I do think that there are anti-Semites who have taken aid and comfort from some of the things that Trump has done.
Do you think that the website Breitbart is, the platform for the alt-right, as Bannon said?
Yes, no. What the alt-right means, I think Breitbart has peddled hatred against Muslims. I think there's no question about it. I think they've actually been much, much softer on Jews. But I think Donald Trump has done some things, retweeting an anti-Semitic image that, at the very least, suggests that he's not been careful on this subject.
Yeah.
Well, but we have to be honest about what constitutes a real threat, Peter. In the final analysis, Iran or Hamas or Hezbollah that threaten genocide against the Jewish people on a regular basis and were not called out by the previous administration. President Obama gave $200 million to the Palestinian Authority as he left office. This, as they used that money, giving $300 million a year to terrorists that really do kill Jews. They don't write things about Jews. They don't defame Jews. They actually murder them, slaughter them, and kill them. That money was given without congressional authority. That money was sent already. So you have to distinguish between threats that are very uncomfortable and they should be condemned versus real threats. You published an article a few days ago condemning all of modern Orthodox Judaism for producing Jared Kushner.
Okay.
You condemned your own religion and your own people.
Let him answer. Let him answer.
Okay. I happen to go to a modern Orthodox synagogue myself. I have for
That's
decades.
no
I think that as the Torah says 36 times more that we as Jews would remember the heart of the stranger because we were strangers in the land of Egypt. It says that more than that Jews should maintain the Sabbath. For a high-ranking Jew in the Trump administration, to do nothing while Trump
Let him finish.
To do nothing and stand by when you have influence in this administration, when the United States turns its back on refugees, when we are a community that made up of immigrants and refugees, I believe that's shameful. And I believe,
You're blaming Judaism?
no,
blame Islam for
excuse me,
terrorism?
you're interrupting me. If a particular mosque had produced a large number of people who were peddling anti-Semitic filth, I would say they needed to do some self-reflection. The institutions, sorry, let me finish. The institutions that produced the moral indifference of Jared Kushner need to ask themselves hard questions. That was my point.
Peter, I'll let you speak, but you can't filibuster. With all due respect, you can't hold Judaism accountable. I find that astonishing. Those people who
holding the institutions
people who wrongly
that
blame
produced Jared
Islam
Kushner
for
accountable.
terrorists and say that Islam is a militant religion are bigoted against Islam. And what you said about Judaism is bigotry against your own faith. Just a moment, please.
Shmuley,
but
you
more,
are
what's more?
Hold on,
Peter,
and you're also
let me finish.
completely changing the subject from the conversation we were supposed to be having. You notice
what is
this,
critical is that while President Obama was president, we begged him to do something in Syria.
Okay, hold on.
For
Rabbi,
500,000 people that
Rabbi, hold on. Hey, hold on,
Trump.
Peter. The default is to go back to the Obama administration. The Obama administration is over. I'm asking you about the Trump administration.
The default is to put values ahead of partisanship in politics. Those people.
No, I'm asking you about a
conversation.
I'm asking you about a conversation that is taking place in the present.
Correct.
And the reality is, not an alt reality. The reality is that it's the Trump administration now. It's not the Obama administration. Every time someone comes on, they speak for Donald Trump, and it's something that they don't like. They go, "Oh, well, the Obama administration did this," as a deflective, shiny thing. Let's talk about the Trump administration's responsibility.
I will criticize the Trump administration
the
on
former
refugees,
administration that you cannot go back and change history.
Correct. I will criticize the Trump administration on refugees. I'm a Jew. Peter is right. We must welcome in the stranger. The point I'm making is the reason why our country is so divided is all of us are guilty of putting partisanship and politics before values. What are the values? Human life is of infinite value. And that means that every administration, from the previous ones to the present one, must welcome in refugees. But the people who are now faulting only this administration, Syria has been a problem for years. We must do something about it. We have to create safe zones. I think there should be no-fly zones. President Trump should pick up the phone right now to Vladimir Putin and say, "You want a relationship with me? You're the master of Syria. You control Bashar Assad is Putin's puppet. He should order the end of the carnage in Syria immediately." It's not just about welcoming refugees. It's about stopping genocide, stopping genocide, stopping genocide.
All right, Rabbi. Let me just get your response on the. I'll give you the last word on the current current.
Look, I agree that the Obama administration did not do enough, and that this is one of the signature stains on Obama's presidency. I agree with that. But now we have a situation, an unprecedented situation, where a president is saying we are not going to allow in any refugees. It seems to me this is a moral crisis for Americans, and especially for Jews, given our history. It's a time for us to stand up.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Fascinating conversation.